Namaskaram. Last episode, we wandered through the divine mist of mythology, where gods, sages, and warriors shaped the origin myths of Kalaripayattu. But now, we shift our gaze from mythology to history. This is episode 2, the history of Kalaripayattu. Ancient scriptures and references. Kalaripayattu's ancient roots are not limited to oral tradition or local folklore. Its foundation is deeply embedded in India's classical martial science, the Dhanurveda, the Veda of warfare. As one of the 4 Upavedas, the Dhanurveda outlines comprehensive systems of martial training covering archery, swordsmanship, physical postures, and battlefield strategy, all of which resonate with the principles found in Kalaripayattu. Kautilya's Arthashastra, a seminal work on governance and statecraft, reinforces this martial foundation. It delves into the disciplined training of warriors, covert operations, and protective measures, reflecting a structured cultivation of martial knowledge akin to the Kalari discipline. The Agni Purana, one of the 18 Mahapuranas, further strengthens this lineage. It dedicates entire chapters to the Dhanurveda, classifying weapons, warrior archetypes, and techniques of combat, offering a rare textual bridge between spiritual philosophy and practical warfare, elements central to Kalaripayattu. Moving beyond Sanskrit texts, the Dravidian cultural sphere provides additional insights. Sangam literature, notably Akananuru and Purananuru, vividly portrays battlefield valor, warrior codes, and duels, echoing the ethical framework and heroic ideals upheld in Kalari traditions. Tamil epics like Silappatikaram and Manimekalai also reference combat practices and weaponry, pointing to a shared martial ethos. Even classical performance arts carry the imprint of martial training. The Natya Shastra, an authoritative text on drama and dance, integrates physical control, dynamic postures, and expressive power, aspects that would later shape forms like Kathakali and Theyyam, both of which retain clear traces of Kalaripayattu's martial aesthetics. First foreign accounts. The earliest glimpses of Kerala's martial heritage through foreign eyes come from the famed traveller Ibn Battuta. He visited Kerala around 1342. He described Kerala as a land of warrior kings, powerful yet peaceful. The rulers commanded vast armies but chose honor over conquest. The Nair warriors, he noted, impressed him with their discipline, loyalty, and restraint, a true mark of nobility in warfare. In 1442, the Persian diplomat, historian, and traveller from Herat, Abdur Razzaq, visited Kerala and described the native warriors as nearly naked, wearing only cloth around their waist. He marveled at their gleaming daggers and light ox-hide shields, capturing the agility, discipline, and deadly precision of Kerala's martial traditions. Balthasar Sprenger, a Bavarian explorer, arrived in Kannur in 1505 with a Portuguese expedition. He documented and illustrated Nair warriors, providing one of the earliest European records of Kerala's martial traditions. Duarte Barbosa, who travelled in Kerala from 1500 to 1517, offered one of the first detailed accounts. He wrote of the Nairs of Malabar as elite warrior clans, trained from childhood in the art of combat. Under masters called Panikkers, they mastered the sword and shield. Ludovico di Varthema, an Italian traveller, came to Kerala in 1505 and saw the Nairs as a force of 50,000, armed with swords, shields, lance, bows, and even artillery. Despite their skill, they lived humbly, barefoot and near naked, tying red turbans only in times of war. They used no horses. Elephants were seen, but rarely for war. Their strength lay in unity, not in armor. Fernão Lopes de Castaneda painted them as fierce and fearless. He described their assault as a storm, arrows and spears falling like rain. Though they fought the Portuguese, their courage and martial discipline earned his grudging respect. Jean Huygens van Linschoten echoed this. He saw them as masters of guerrilla warfare, striking fast, vanishing faster, barefoot, barely clothed. They moved with unmatched agility. Even under foreign control, they fought back with pride and precision. Francois Pirard de Laval, the French traveller of the 17th century, called them as proud martial castes. bodyguards and soldiers to their kings, especially the Zamorin. Disciplined, agile, and fiercely loyal, trained from youth and living by a warrior's code. Honor wasn't just a value, it was their identity. Os Lusíadas, the great Portuguese epic poem by Luís Vaz de Camões, offers a rare literary glimpse into Kerala's warrior culture. In Canto 7, Camões describes the Nair warriors of Calicut as a noble and disciplined martial caste, elite protectors of the Zamorin. Admired for their loyalty and courage, the Nairs are portrayed as proud defenders of their land, bound by a strict warrior code and revered by their rulers. Francis Day explicitly described the military setup and martial excellence of the Nairs in his 1863 book, The Land of the Perumals. William Logan's 1887 book, Malabar Manual, gives rich detail on the martial culture of the Nairs, their training methods, weapons, and even the cultural transmission of martial knowledge. Sir Hector Munro, a British general who served as the 9th Commander-in-Chief of India, provided observations on the Nair warriors during his military campaigns in South India around 1761. While some British accounts criticized the Nair fighting style as lacking traditional discipline, Munro acknowledged their effective guerrilla tactics. He noted, "They lurk behind the sandbanks and bushes, then they appear like bees. They point their guns and fire them well." These foreign voices didn't just record history, they recognized a legacy. The Nair warrior wasn't merely a soldier, he was the living embodiment of Kerala's martial soul. Northern Ballads, Angam and Mamankam. If the scriptures gave Kalaripayattu its skeleton and foreign eyes gave it form, then the soul of this warrior art lives in the Ballads, the Vadakkan Paattugal, the northern ballads of Malabar. The Vadakkan Paattugal, literally the Ballads of the North, are a collection of Malayalam folk ballads that span from the 12th to 20th century. They echo the valor, dilemmas, and downfall of legendary warriors from Kerala's medieval past. These ballads aren't just songs, they are firelit memories passed from elders to children. They speak of warriors whose stories are etched into Kerala's cultural DNA. There was Tacholiyothenan, the invisible duelist, Unniyarcha, the fearless woman who wielded the urumi like lightning, and Aromal Chekavar, the tragic hero betrayed not by blade but by blood. Standing beside and sometimes against them was Aringodar, a master Anga Chekavar, dignified, principled, and feared. He was a dual opponent in the fated Angam that cost Aromal his life. Though on opposite sides, Aringodar wasn't a villain. He represented the noble, skilled warrior whose honor matched his sword. And then there was Chandu Chekavar, perhaps the most complex figure in the ballads. Trained in the same Kalari as Aromal and Unniyarcha, he was kin, but envy burned in his heart. Love denied, honor wounded, pride twisted. Chandu's betrayal of Aromal remains one of the most heartbreaking moments in Kerala's martial lore. But these stories didn't unfold in isolation. They pulsed through a larger scale. Mamankam, held once every 12 years on the banks of the Bharatapuzha. Mamankam was more than a festival. It was a grand conclave of power, trade, culture, and blood. Here, warriors from all over Kerala gathered, not only to celebrate, but to challenge. It was at Mamankam that Chaver warriors, death-bound heroes, sought to assassinate the reigning Zamorin, sacrificing their lives in a final blaze of honor. Kalaripayattu was their rite of passage, death, their declaration of loyalty. Through these stories, Kalaripayattu was not just combat, it was dharma, honor, vengeance, loyalty, and tragedy. The ballads carried ethical dilemmas and human flaws. They told us that a warrior's path is never simple, it is forged in the fire of choice. Colonization and suppression. Over time, Kalaripayattu evolved and adapted, shaped by changing societies, shifting values, and the trials of history. By the 18th century, it had become more than just a martial training. It was a symbol of identity, rebellion, and regional pride, and to the colonial eye, that made it dangerous. With the arrival of colonial powers, especially the British, martial arts were seen as a threat. In 1804, following the Kottayattu War, a fierce rebellion led by Kerala's lion-hearted king Palashiraja. The British imposed a ban on Kalaripayattu. The ban came into full force soon after Palashiraja's death in 1805. Once a respected tradition, Kalaripayattu was now criminalized. Kalaris were shut down, weapons confiscated. The warrior shout was silenced. But even in silence, resistance lived on. Gurukuls, the masters of Kalari, became keepers of an underground flame. In hushed corners, behind locked doors, and under moonlit skies, they continued to teach, to preserve, to defy. Names like Kottikal Kanaran Gurukul, Kelukuruppu Gurukul, and Maroli Ramunni Gurukul rose like whispers in the dark, passing on a legacy they refused to let die. Their courage sparked a quiet revolution, one that would later awaken into the revival of Kalaripayattu in the early 20th century. Revival of Kalaripayattu. The flame never died, and by the early 20th century, it began to burn brighter. In the 1920s, a quiet resurgence took root in Thalassery. Across Kerala, forgotten Kalaris reopened, lost techniques were recalled, and the warrior spirit stirred once again. Leading this revival were masters like Kottikal Kanaran Gurukul and his student Chambadan Veetil Narayanan Nair, who founded the renowned CVN Kalari schools. Their mission to reclaim Kalari from the shadows and return it to the soul of Kerala. Another name echoed in this rebirth, Chirakil T. Sridharan Nair. In 1937, he wrote Kalaripayattu, the first book ever written on the art. His meticulous documentation, later expanded into a complete guide by his sons, remains the most authentic reference to this day. Kalaripayattu began finding new expressions, influencing classical dance, physical theatre, and cinematic choreography. Artists like Vasundhara Doraswamy brought his grades into Bharatanatyam, weaving martial rhythm into aesthetic form. In 2017, the nation honoured a living embodiment of Kalaripayattu, Meenakshi Amma, the 73-year-old Gurukul from Vadakara with the Padma Shri, for a lifetime of devotion to preserving this ancient legacy. And in 2021, the story came full circle as the government of Kerala announced the establishment of the Kalaripayattu Academy at the Kerala Arts and Craft Village in Thiruvananthapuram, a dedicated space to revive, teach, and celebrate the ancient art. 2 years later, in 2023, the academy was formally inaugurated during the Attachuvodu festival, with Padma Shri Meenakshi Amma herself leading the way. Under her guidance, a new generation began to train, not in hiding, but in pride. What we inherit today is not just a martial art. It's a legacy forged in scriptures, observed by travelers, sung by bards, and preserved through generations. Kalaripayattu's history is not buried in time. It breathes through every form, stance, and strike. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the history of Kalaripayattu. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss future episodes. I look forward to sharing more with you. See you in the next episode.